Can I ask that the live stream is started and verbal confirmation provided that we're broadcasting?
Yes, I can confirm, Chair, that we're now live.
Great, thank you. So welcome to this meeting of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for the meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film and photograph and record our public meeting, providing it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. Thank you. Have you got that? To ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible, keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Thank you. So, I'd like to welcome everybody. I think it would be quite helpful if we could just quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves. And possibly what we'll do is we'll start online because we do have people joining us remotely. So we have Gail Hancock, who's the Service Director for Improvement, joining us remotely. And I'd quite like to confirm, please, Gail, that you can hear and check that we can hear you. So if you could confirm that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also joining us remotely, we've got Councillor Liz Harvey. Good afternoon, Councillor Harvey.
Good afternoon, Chair. I can see and hear you, and I'm hopefully a suitable distance away in terms of being infectious at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I can see that you're not feeling very good at all. Thank you. We've also got Co-optee Anna Eccleston joining us. Hello, Anna. Can you see and hear us?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Great. Thanks for joining us. So we've got other council members, officers here, and if we could quickly go through the room. So maybe if we just do elected members first. So if you could just introduce yourself quickly, because I know not everybody is familiar with everyone.
Hi, I'm Ben Proctor. I'm the Councillor for College Ward.
Richard Thomas, Wormside.
Yeah, Councillor Robert Highfield, Castle Ward.
So I'm Sam Prattley. I'm the representative from the Diocese of Hereford.
And Councillor Kenya, Tupsy Ward.
Jaswinder McAndrew, Acting Head of Service for Fostering, Adoption and Home Finding.
Hi everybody, I'm Ivan Powell. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children's Services.
And officers?
Simon Cann, Clerk of the Committee.
Daniel Webb, Statutory Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you, and I'm Tony Fagan, I'm Chair of the Committee. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Claire Davies, Councillor Rob Williams and Jan Francis, the co-opted families representative.
Thank you. And have we received details of members nominated to attend meeting in place of other members of the committee?
Yes, Councillor Richard Thomas will be stepping in for Councillor Rob Williams today.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Thomas. Do members of the committee have any declarations of interest in respect to any items on the agenda? None that we can see. So item 4 is the minutes. To approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of March 2024. Are there any proposed corrections for accuracy? None that I could see, so I would move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of March be agreed as a correct record. Can I sign those minutes as approved, please? Everyone happy? Thank you. Right, questions from members of the public. Have we received any written questions from members of the public?
Yes, we received 4 questions from members of the public that were accepted. The questions and responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda for this meeting on Herefordshire Council's website.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind everybody that due to the sensitive nature of some of the issues that are being considered by committee today, your supplementary questions must not disclose any confidential or exempt information, names of individuals, or provide information where they can easily be identified. For example, individual officers of public bodies, making criminal accusations, or referring to an issue which is currently the subject of a formal council complaint. If your question does comply with this instruction, does not comply with this instruction, your microphone will be turned off and you'll be asked to return to the public gallery with no further opportunity to speak. Are there any supplementary questions from the public?
Yes, we've had 2 accepted supplementary questions from the public. They're on display now and I shall read them out with responses where available. The first question was submitted by Ms Donna Conway from Leominster. The question reads, if the police were to make an urgent mass referral about an approved foster carer because of concerns the police hold about the risk of the child sexual abuse to the children in her care, is the foster panel made aware of those police concerns? And if so, are these concerns mediated to the foster panel by the local authorities, social workers, or by the police directly? The response given to that was local safeguarding partners, including the police, process responses to safeguarding referrals via the multi-agency safeguarding hub. Agency checks and child protection inquiries will be undertaken in accordance with established child protection procedures upon receipt of concerns and allegations. The local authority designated officer will also be involved in coordinating a response about an adult who works with children in a paid or unpaid capacity when there is a concern they may have behaved in a way that caused harm to a child. The fostering panel is made aware of relevant findings which may affect the foster carer's approval status, and regular reviews are also undertaken on an annual basis. The second question was submitted by Miss Reid of Hereford. Supplementary question reads, my original public question included the average cost of one child in care for 1 year was in January 2023, in-house fostering over 16,000, private fostering, brackets, independent fostering agency, IFAs, over 46,000. And I understand that in Herefordshire, the rate of children privately fostered is high compared with rate of statistical neighbours or nationally. The response stated, we currently have only 1 child who is subject to private fostering. To clarify, I understand that the rate of children placed with independent fostering agencies by Herefordshire Council is higher than the rate of similar areas. This suggests poor working relationships, etc., with past, potential and current in-house foster carers. How will the rate of in-house foster carers be increased at pace? And a response will be provided in writing to that question.
And thank you very much to the members of the public for the questions, and I suspect possibly even the discussion that we have today might even provide an answer to that question. But yeah, the questions are much appreciated. Have we had any questions, written questions from members of the council?
No questions submitted from councillors.
Okay, thank you. Then the item on the chair update to communicate or receive updates of any work or activity relevant to the committee's remit. I just wonder if I can hand over to the scrutiny officer just to update us on any committee developments that we need to be aware of.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things I'd like to share with you. First of all, we will be hosting a scrutiny work programming day on May the 30th. This is open to all elected members of the council, where we will be looking very generally at the work of the council over the next 12 months and how scrutiny might contribute to that work. This will feed into thematic work programming meetings that we'll be having. Yours will be taking place, I believe, I just refer back to my calendar, on the 26th or the 27th of June. So you should have an invitation for that in your diary, where we will sit down with our calendar as meetings for the year ahead and discuss the topics that we wish to place on that, and the support and the training and the information, the data that we'll need as part of those that programme of work. You might remember as well that we have an ongoing wish to go and visit the MASH. Some of you went to visit the MASH early last year, or late last year, sorry, and we've been working to find another date for that. We've been handed a bunch of dates in June, so Simon, my colleague here, will be in touch shortly to ask which of those that you're free, so we can firm that up sometime in June. So lots going on between now and July. Thank you very much. Just to confirm, because I think that would have probably been off camera, the meeting is confirmed as 26th of June. Thank you, Councillor Highfield, for correcting me on that.
Thank you, Daniel, and apologies for pantsing that on you. Right. So if we go to item number 8, which is the introduction to fostering. So we've had a report on the introduction to the fostering service, and we've got Gail Hancock on the call with us, who is the Service Director for Improvement. Gail, would you like to just talk us through the report that you submitted, please?
Certainly, Councillor Fagan. Just one small correction. I was previously the Service Director for Improvement, and I'm currently the Service Director for Corporate Parenting. My role has changed slightly, but I'm very happy to take us through the slides. If we can move to the first slide, please. So just before I start, Councillor Fagan, you had very helpfully extended an invitation to local foster carers, and we had hoped that our local foster carers, there would be representation today. Unfortunately, we've not been able to be successful on that, but we're fairly confident that if Scrutiny were to reschedule a further discussion regarding fostering, then we would certainly, with a little bit more notice, be able to meet that request. So, excuse me, if I launch in terms of introducing Scrutiny members to our fostering service, Herefordshire does indeed have an in-house fostering service, and that is so that we can provide a range of foster care provision for our children in care and our young people in care. This is different to Independent Fostering Agency, or IFAs as they're often called for short. They are private and voluntary organisations, and they also provide fostering services, but they're separate to the local authority resource. Currently, the fostering service, or at least at the time these slides were put together, had 168 approved fostering households, and some of those households are approved for one child and some for a number of children. So the totality of the capacity that we have in-house is to care for 272 of our children in care, and broadly that breaks down to the approved fostering households being able to offer 86 foster care households and 69 connected care households. Connected care households are also referred to, you may have heard them being referred to as family of friends or kinship carers. We also have 15 respite care households. At the time these slides were prepared, we had 25 foster care households that had some capacity to offer respite, that's respite to principally other foster carers, or some short-term care. Next slide, please. Staffing in the service. So This has been a priority improvement action during 23-24 to focus on stabilising and building capacity in the fostering service. And we've had a lot of focus on our workforce development to deliver more relational and restorative support for our foster carers, and also to address the recruitment and retention priorities that we have within our children's improvement plan. In the last year, we have been able to stabilise the management structure for the fostering service. So I took up my role fairly recently on the 8th of April, but we have Jazz, who is within the Scrutiny Committee today, Jasvinder McAndrews, who is a permanent council employee and has been seconded as an existing head of service to head up the fostering service. We also have a permanent service manager and 3 permanent team managers. In terms of our practitioners overall, we have 20 permanent practitioners and 11 agency practitioners. And when I looked most recently at the end of last week, just before the weekend, our fostering service was 65% permanent. That has been a development as part of our children's improvement work, and that is an ongoing and active recruitment campaign. We strongly, as part of our workforce strategy, believe that by stabilising and having a more permanent management leadership team, we will be able to grow more permanent staffing across the fostering service and indeed across many of the other services that we provide. And that is now starting to yield some benefits, but we still have a way to go. Next slide, please. In January of this year, following some work within the service, there was a proposal that agreed to realign the fostering service to make sure that the way that we were organising our resources and delivering our services were more efficient and effective. So we now have 4 teams within the fostering service, and they are listed here. So recruitment and assessment, connected persons and special guardian, the fostering support team, so fostering social workers who go to visit and support all of our approved foster carers, plus we have a home finding team. And if we move on to the next slide, I'll then take us through what each of those teams are responsible for doing. So if we start with the fostering recruitment and assessment team, as the title suggests, this particular team that comprises of a team manager, a recruitment officer, marketing officer, training officer, and 2 assessing social workers are focused on recruitment and assessment. So the team's responsible for attracting new foster carers through proactive marketing campaigns, and all of the recruitment activity, which includes all of the initial engagement around initial visits and responding to inquiries, as well as undertaking assessments, which are known as Form F assessments for all of our mainstream foster carers, plus the provision of training for all of our foster carers, but also including prospective foster carers who are undergoing an assessment. And we had our new team manager who's permanent recently join us in April. So if we move on to the next team, oh sorry, I said next slide, not next team. So the fostering recruitment developments that have been underway over the past period include a whole range of different initiatives. So there now are regular newsletters, training newsletters, upping the focus on digital marketing, media activity and campaigns, and revamping a lot of the information events that we have to promote both the role and the importance of fostering in Herefordshire. We have a recruitment strategy, and that includes also the successful retention of our foster carers, and those foster carers, and there is a body of research behind this, that foster carers are themselves some of the best champions for promoting foster care in Herefordshire. And indeed, that's a tried and tested method of recruitment in other local authorities as well. And we have provided a financial incentive as part of that strategy in terms of a £500 referral scheme for foster carers. We have a new foster care marketing recruitment campaign, and we've increased our oversight of quality assurance and scrutiny to make sure that our response to fostering inquiries is very prompt. We know that failure to be prompt means that foster carers often go to either a neighbouring local authority or to a local independent fostering agency. It's a very competitive market, and so speed is of the essence. And it's also important that that's an in-person response to make sure that that's relational from the get-go. We have, not just us in Herefordshire, but we across the country have a foster carer fortnight. This year it's between the 13th and 16th of May, and we're finalising plans around the activities and the events that we will have in Herefordshire to promote and celebrate our foster carers and the role, the very important role that they play with our children in care. So in terms of current activity around assessment, we have recruitment activity where we have 5 assessments that are in progress, 2 inquiries that are going to be assessed upon formal receipt of applicants' applications, and 3 other inquiries where we are progressing to initial visits. So if I could just go to the next slide, please. So the next team is our Connected Persons and Special Guardian team. So we have a permanent team manager also appointed fairly recently in March. We have 8 social workers, the breakdown is there, and 1 permanent kinship support worker. We have that person who's just been interviewed and an offer has been made, and they've accepted. So the focus of this team is to progress the viability and full assessments for connected persons and special guardians. They also provide the supervision and the support for approved connected persons and those that have been agreed as special guardians. And they also have oversight and support provided for private fostering. We have 1 child who is currently privately fostered currently. And if I can just go to the next slide. So the priorities, as I've described, are about undertaking the viability assessments and completing the full assessments. There is statutory guidance and practice standards that are agreed, including timescales. There is awareness raising regarding PF, so that's short for private fostering, and the identification of children who are in private fostering arrangements. We rely on our partnership with the Herefordshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership so that all professionals working in Herefordshire who come across a child in a private fostering arrangement know to notify the local authorities. So we are dependent on our partners for those notifications in the course of their work across the county. There is also foster carer training that is provided to connected foster carers, and we have a designated administrator to help support the progress of all the necessary checks and all the compliance checks that are required. And we have a special guardianship policy and a family and friends policy as well. All of those things have been reviewed and revamped and relaunched in recent times. We were just about to relaunch our special guardianship policy, which is much awaited. And the Ombudsman in the last couple of weeks has recently made a decision, which means we've taken some further legal advice so that we can update our special guardianship policy in line with the Ombudsman decision to make sure that we don't launch and then have to relaunch again. So that work will be completed very shortly. In terms of fostering support team, we have 2 permanent team managers. One started in February of last year and 1 joined us in this month. We have 4 permanent social workers, of which 2 work full-time part-time, and one permanent social worker who works a 0.6 full-time equivalent role. As you can see, I've listed all of the various staff. There's various different arrangements, but we have to have 2 team managers in order to ensure that the support for all of our approved foster care households is adequate. And so the focus of the team, as the title of the team would suggest, is to supervise and support all of our social work foster carers. There are minimum national standards for supporting foster carers, and there are some of our foster carers who are approved or have a dual approval, and so as well as providing foster care on a long time respite or overnight break, they might also provide respite care and or supported lodging. So we have various different approval arrangements with some of our foster carers, and those supported lodgings arrangements are for our young people aged 18 to 21. So that's where children have been placed with foster carers for a period of time and are very stable and are very much part of that fostering household. And when they reach 18 and up to 21, what happens is that where the young person would like this and where it's agreed with the foster carers, they become supported lodgings, and so that means it's least disruptive for the young people. So if we just move on. So I think I've probably gone through all of the various ways in which the fostering support team support our fostering households. Very important to provide the support in order to promote placement stability. We're always trying to promote placement stability because that delivers the best outcomes for children and young people. And it's important that our foster carers do feel supported by us. And historically, that hasn't always been the case. But much more effort is being made now to ensure that our foster carers are appropriately supported. So if I just move on, please, to the next slide. So our home finding team, they have a number of priorities to identify and secure placement provision, which is not our in-house fostering provision. So that's a combination of residential care, foster care through independent fostering agencies, supported accommodation, short breaks, and if necessary, secure welfare provision. We don't have any of our children in care or young people in secure welfare provision at the moment. And the aim, the priority aim for the home finding team is to ensure value for money for the council, to make sure that we get the best possible care when we're unable, for whatever reason, to place our children with our in-house foster carers. They also need to work strategically with providers to secure sufficient local provision. We have a refreshed sufficiency strategy which was signed off and launched last year, and that in addition to our in-house fostering service, we do still rely on all of the provision that I listed previously. But the aim, the strategic aim, is to boost our in-house fostering service as much as we possibly can to increase our fostering household numbers so that even more children, where appropriate, can be placed with in-house foster carers. And this is definitely to secure local homes for local children. There have been a number of improvements that have been made over this past period, particularly relationships with providers. And part of that has been ensuring that we are efficient and effective regarding making prompt and accurate payments to those providers for care delivered. We also, through the home finding team, negotiate. So we try to negotiate the best possible deal, but also making sure that we are providing quality assured homes for our children. And this requires quite a lot of relationship building and development, And we also have a lot of communication with in-house professionals, those allocated social workers and line managers who are supporting children in care and care leavers, making sure that we understand what their profile of needs, risks and circumstances are, so that the home finding team, if we are needing to reach out to external providers, have a really clear profile that promotes the child and can really assist us with an accurate matching. All evidence indicates that positive profiles that are accurate really do help us to find the best possible match, and the best possible match builds security and stability for children, which, as I've said before, is obviously one of the key aims, that we place children really well in a home. Ideally, our in-house fostering service will provide a foster carer, and if not, with our external providers. And of course, if there is any action that is necessary, we take prompt and effective action to safeguard our children. So I think if we just move on. So one of the key component parts of our fostering service is to have a fostering panel. So the fostering panel has a very clear function, which is to make recommendations about a person's suitability to be a foster carer. So the fostering panel considers the terms of a person's approval. So that may include the number of children, the age range of the children, and they then make a recommendation to the agency decision maker, which is a service director or director, to make that approval decision. The panel has a panel advisor. We currently have an interim panel advisor and are seeking, hopefully, to move to a permanent basis for that. And the panel advisors have a very important role to, as you would expect, advise panel members and manage the relationship between the local authority and the panel, including quality assuring practice and feeding back to everyone who's involved in the panel work. So members of the panel are independent of the local authority, and there are representatives of the local community in Herefordshire, and we have panel members who are elected members. So currently Councillor Diana Toynbee and Councillor Robert Highfield. There have been 3 new panel members recruited in the last 12 months, and there's been 22 panels held between March of 23 and March of 24. Panels consider new foster carer approvals of all foster carers, including connected carers, plus annual reviews and changes to the terms of any foster carer's approval. This may come following a LADO intervention if there is a safeguarding concern regarding a foster carer, and the fostering panel will consider those reviews along with any resignations and any notes about exemptions to the terms of the foster carer's approval. So the fostering panel has a brochure which introduces the panel members and panel invitees, so those who are attending the panel to be approved know who they will meet when they attend the panel on the day. And there is feedback directly from the fostering panel to invitees, and the feedback that we receive is that the invitees report very positively and say that that is a very welcoming experience. So this next slide, Councillor Fagan, I will come back to you because I'm sure you will invite any questions. I should just say there has been Appendix 2 provided, which in response to some additional questions and queries from scrutiny members has been prepared, and I can go through that, or I'm happy to address any of those questions.
Thank you, Gail. I can see that Councillor Kenyon has a question. So if I'll, Councillor Kenyon, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks very much. Along
right at the beginning of that, you mentioned that you couldn't get any foster carers to come along today. I am disappointed in that. I do understand the reason though, because they'll feel if they came here and spoke honestly, they may well not get placements. That's happened in the past, where they're pushed to one side or seen as trouble. So I just want to, I did a bit of scratching around because we knew this was coming up last week, and I was inundated with foster carers that wanted to say something. So I just want to read this out. This is a foster carer that emailed me. I'll read the first bit and I'll read the last bit. We have been so concerned about the handling of children's care that we felt we had no choice but hand our notice in. When we voiced our concerns, they were not listened to or acted upon, and the same issues were repeated time and time again, to the detriment of the children. We have so much information in emails and upheld complaints that we will go through. However, I will attach them, and I will send that out to the committee, the emails that I was sent. And the last little bit I want to read. Sorry, let's scroll down. Our aim in fostering has always been in the best interest of the children. We have been very strong advocates for them, something that apparently is lacking within social services. This email is not one that we would ever have envisaged sending, but over the years we are afraid that the same faults are apparent. We are demoralised and defeated by everything. Now that's very damning, but I thought I just wanted to set the scene. I haven't got some questions now, and there's many other things like that. I just would like to say there is some really good fostering that goes out, some really good fosterers, and there's some good social workers that work within the fostering service. It's not right the way across the board, and as we all know, it does need to improve. But I'm just going to run through a few other things. You mentioned practitioner. I take it when you said practitioner, that's a fully trained social worker as opposed to a support worker. When I look at these, I see heavily balanced towards social workers, and I've advocated before, we need more support workers across the board. I'm going to rattle through. I'm going to take a bit of a scattergun approach, Gail. If you want to sort of pick out these things, it's all constructive. I know we've lost a number of carers. You've spoke about how many new are coming on board with great enthusiasm, but the sadness is we are losing just as many or more that are going out the door. There's various reasons for that, as you mentioned before. There's outside, there's better options for fostering and better rates. There's approved carers with no placements. So that's what we're talking about, where they've jumped through all the hoops, they're ready to go, and they don't get any placements. And it was mentioned that there's sometimes his favourites let's look at a football team. So notice that you've got your favourites in a football team get picked every time. Then you've got others that you put in the team. Well, there's a few carers out there feel as if they're not even being put in the team, and their favourites get picked first time. So that needs to be looked at. Who's picking the team, and who's being picked regularly? It'd be interesting to see that. Other things that I mentioned was penny pinching. When you went on and said, we like to get things paid, we like to get things done. If you do a job, you want to be paid for it. And the kinship people especially, I think they had to, then they have to go to, they had a pay rise of 12% last April, and it was only implemented. I don't know if it's even been implemented yet. It wasn't even brought up, and they brought it to attention several times. That was last April. We're now into, a year on and into May. So it was 13 months. They waited for a national pay increase. So when you say we like to pay these people, well, it doesn't seem the case. So penny pinching, the financial side of things needs to be done better, and because people won't be paid for the job they do. Foster carers, they feel like they're scapegoated. If it's a complaint made, these are professional people. Some of these have been 10, 20, 30 years foster caring in Herefordshire. They are professional. These people care, often they're painted. They can take some of the most difficult children into foster care, into their homes to be looked after. If there's accusations made, they're not believed. On many cases, they're not believed, and they're not dealt with quickly enough. It can mean that they can lose their livelihood because they run businesses. Yes, they look after children, but they run it and they all must run it as a business. The priority is always the child, but they perhaps take bigger mortgages, buy bigger houses to be able to carry out this business. They need to be supported, and I feel they're not being supported. The voice of the carer is not being listened to. They have meetings. I know there's a group that meet with the chief executive and senior councillors and the like, and things are talked about. And when they're talked about, that's fantastic, but they're then not acted upon, and that's awful. It stinks of the post office scandal where the people at the top know what's going on, not doing anything about it. That is the problem. It's not the actual problem, but not doing anything about it. So if you know something, you need to act quickly. It's not being done. I won't talk about what they thought of the last director because it's unwritable, but they felt that they just weren't listened to at all. I'm just going to pick up a few more bits here. It's another thing, the child is always believed. The child is always believed above these foster carers, these professional people. Now, some of these, as I said before, some of these have been up to 30 years fostering. And a social worker can sort of train up and that sort of stuff, become a social worker, go along, and all of a sudden, the social worker is believed and the foster carer isn't. What's all that about? Just because you've got a qualification in social care, it doesn't mean you're any more qualified than the foster carer who's on the ground actually doing the job. And I think that's appalling. So I'm glad there's two managers. I think they get to manage one each, I think, at the moment. And agency staff within that one group, I think it needs to be addressed. 6 agency and 2 permanent. Let's change the posts around. Let's get some support workers in there as opposed to social workers. Let's get those teams filled up, and let's get those foster carers supported. Council tax for kinship carers. Council tax, it's a perk. I get a perk. I get free parking as a councillor, but the only perk I do get. And but kinship carers, they should be. They get the council tax. They don't pay council tax as with other foster carers. Some might see it as a perk. Some might see it as part of what they do. Now, the frustrating thing is, if you're a kinship carer and you don't get a placement after 6 months, that perk or that payment is added back on. It can be backdated as well. So some of these foster carers that no one likes to get a bill retrospectively. So some of these kinship carers are. That needs to be looked at. Why aren't we supporting these people? You're saying there's £500 for people that bring the people in. Well, let's look after the ones we've got. It's like a bank, isn't it? All you want is the new customers, and you don't want to look after the customers you've already got. So I believe it needs a really, really good shake-up, and from the bottom up. As I said before, there's some great stuff and great social work that's going on within fostering, but it's not good enough. I'm going to leave it here for a minute, Chair, and if I can come in a little bit later, and I know I've scattergunned that, but there's a few questions within that, and there's a few scathing comments, but I'd like to have a reply to those, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kenyon. And I'm sure probably you've raised some points that at some stage others on the committee would like to pick up. Okay, Councillor Highfield. So, Gail, if you could respond to that, and if we can just clarify what the situation is also with the issue around council tax, because I know a lot of councillors have been contacted about council tax and the sort of changes, and I think within the support package that we're talking about would be good to clarify that, and potentially we may need a recommendation to the executive on the particular issue of council tax, but obviously the support that foster carers are getting is absolutely crucial, and I know that we've come from a pretty low base, so hopefully there are some improvements in line that Jazz can tell us about in a bit. But if you could respond to Councillor Kenyon, please.
Thank you. I will certainly try to do so. Could I just start with the council tax exemption for kinship carers, because I would like to assure Councillor Kenyon and others that this is a matter that is definitely on the agenda. There will be a report for the 16th of this month. I met with the Chief Executive last week. It is something that I have discussed with Councillor Powell, and it was a matter that was brought to my attention within a day or two of starting the service director role for corporate parenting on the 8th of April. At the moment, the current position is that there is a differential. So foster carers do receive a council tax exemption, and kinship carers do not. This is what we are seeking to address by the support planning that is in hand currently at the moment. If I just attempt to address some of the points that Councillor Kenyon made, I'm really disappointed, probably as disappointed as Councillor Kenyon is, to hear from any foster carer who feels as disappointing and as concerned as he has shared with us today. Improvements and developments have definitely come from a low base. When I joined Herefordshire Council in my previous role as Improvement Director, I facilitated a number of consultation groups, and this was in respect of the Children's Improvement Plan. And I was very struck on that occasion. I was joined by Eleanor Brazil, and we were very struck with various accounts and stories that foster carers were providing. And I do know that Rabina Khan, who was the previous interim head of service, took it upon herself to meet with as many foster carers as she could in order to hear directly from them. And it was certainly escalated by her, and I heard and saw it for myself, that there was a real need to rebuild trust and confidence within the service. That has been an ongoing process, and it will continue. We invite feedback, and when you invite feedback, you're not necessarily going to always get all of the positive things. Feedback sometimes does need to include some difficult truths, but they have to be listened to and they have to be responded to. And the fostering service continues to progress with that open listening ear. We do need to have supervising social workers who are qualified social workers. That is an expectation through the national minimum standards. But in addition, we do have and are recruiting supports who are not necessarily social work qualified practitioners. We have indeed lost some foster carers who have chosen to leave Herefordshire. They had their reasons for doing that, and we had to accept that, although attempts were made to work with them. Sorry, Councillor Fagan, did you want to say something?
No, it was just that Councillor Kenyon raised a point he wanted to just pick up on then and there. But would you like to do that? We're not getting into too much of a backwards and forwards on it, though.
Thank you, Chair. All it was at Herefordshire, do we not set the amount of numbers of social workers we need for each level? So, say for instance, there's 8. We've got 2 permanent. We've got 6. Can we not change that to 6 and get 4 additional support workers in place? Do we not set those numbers?
The caseload of a supervising social worker is set around the number of approved foster care households that we have, that we need to provide support for. As you know, we do have a workforce strategy, and all of the work over the past year has been to stabilise the fostering service. We are currently, as I mentioned, 65% permanent, which is a significant increase, but I would suggest, and I think most people would agree, that there's still some way to go, because we would want 100% of our workforce to be permanent or thereabouts. In terms of support staff, I don't think the formula is quite as you've suggested Councillor Kenyon. But where we can, we do recruit and promote, and we have some good support workers. But we also need qualified social workers to fulfil the role of the supervising social worker. I don't know whether Jazz, who's the head of service for the fostering service, has anything to add.
Just to say that we have been looking at increasing our numbers of support workers, because we didn't have as many, but we are trying to have them per team. So we do now have 2 support workers in the fostering support team, one of which is on maternity leave, so we need to look at cover, and another one in the kinship and SGO team.
Sorry, that's great, but the point I was making, can we not change those numbers? Why can't we change those numbers? Because if you're a foster carer, you just want to see someone to be listened to. Doesn't matter if they're social work qualified, because they know damn well that that support worker will take back and feed into the social worker the points that need to be done. To me, it seems if you cannot get the staff, if you cannot keep the staff, if you cannot get the staff, you look at the NHS, what they've done. Nurses now do doctors' roles and that sort of stuff. Carers do the nurses' roles. Okay. Within social work, it's completely broken. We all know we haven't got enough social workers in the country, and they can choose where they want to go. They can jump around like Scarlet Pimpernels. Okay, because they're in demand. Well, we need to change that demand. And if we don't let's look at the way we do things in Herefordshire. Let's start a revolution, perhaps. That's why I sit down the end all on my own. All right, let's do something different. Let's think differently outside the box. Let's change the amount of numbers of social workers we've got. Let's put more support workers in that actually support the foster carers, because this is what you're hearing here. They're not being supported. They want to be supported. To make the best service, we have to be the best. And they just want people there. Doesn't matter if they're social worker trained, if they've got a degree in social work, it doesn't matter. They just want to be listened to by someone and their thoughts conveyed.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Powell, you wanted to come in.
If I could, it might be helpful if we have a conversation outside of the meeting, but to go through a bit more detail. But it is a fact. Gail mentioned the workforce strategy. There are ongoing considerations and discussion about the profile of the workforce that is required. So the numbers of and the mix of qualified social workers, family support workers and that. So there is ongoing work there. We know the direction of travel that we want to go in, but it is absolutely correlates to the current workload. Social workers have to be involved in particular cases in certain circumstances. And the way to get to that balance of qualified social workers and family support workers is to make sure that the caseload is appropriate, and of course reducing caseload, so reducing a particular case. Let's say we step down from level 4 child protection to level 3 targeted early help. To do that, that absolutely must be done with the child or the children at the centre, and it must be done in a way that is really, really safe. So there is a plan. We understand the plan. We understand the details. We've got a good idea of the exact numbers, but it very definitely also relates to the improvement journey.
Thank you. And Councillor Kenyon, I think when we discuss the workforce at the next meeting, again, we will look specifically at this issue of social workers, the edge of care support, and all the other support people that come in. But I think you do raise an important point about the support for foster carers and the families. Gail, did you want to say any more on that, or?
Yeah, I did, if you don't mind, Councillor Fagan. I just want to make sure that when I say supervising social worker, I'm referring to the foster carers supervising social worker. I'm not referring to the children's allocated social worker. So in the fostering service, we have social workers who are dedicated to the support and supervision of foster carers and foster carer households. They are separate to the allocated social workers for the children and young people in our care. And we are required through minimum standards, national minimum standards, to have allocated social workers to undertake those roles. We're not required in the same way to have support workers, although, as Jazz has said, that is an area that we are attempting to develop alongside having our qualified supervising social workers. And those supervising social workers are there specifically for foster carers. They obviously will always hold a safeguarding remit, as everybody will within social care, but they're not the same as the allocated social workers for children in care and young people in our care.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So many questions. As was already noted, I'm a member of the fostering panel. First of all, I'd like to say something about the kinship carers. I think you need to take a real rethink, because if you choose to be a foster carer, it's at a time in your life while you're ready for it. You've got the accommodation, you've got the funding, whether you want to do it as a business or because you're just trying to help the world. Nevertheless, you are prepared. But kinship fosterers are usually not prepared at all. They get their sister's children or their uncle's children, and they don't want to see them go into care, so they take them at short notice. They may not be prepared. They don't just need equal support, they need more support than a regular foster carer, because kinship, all the ones I've come across at the fostering panels so far, have really needed support, and they're in every case wonderful people who have taken this on at short notice in often onerous circumstances with difficult family circumstances. They need more support, and the council tax is just one part of it. So I'd like to put that in straight away. And then going on with the fostering panel, which I've learnt a bit more about, but not as much as I should, because I've had no training, even though I've been a member of the fostering panel since November last year. And I keep getting promised training and haven't had any. But luckily, the people on the fostering panel are the most wonderful people I've ever met, I think. They're terrific. And so far, the fostering social workers that you describe, they've been exceptional. I've been very impressed with everyone I've met. But there is a problem with liaison between them and the children's social workers. That, first of all, it seems to be an issue. They're not always getting the information they need. There doesn't always seem to be a link up between the two social workers that are involved. So that's another issue that we seem to have come across. And also on the fostering panel, we often come across information that's outside our remit. We're only there to do certain things, approve a fostering situation, change the type of children that can be fostered and so on. But we sometimes come across information that's, to us, very important. And the channel for us to pass that on for action by somebody else doesn't seem to be a very clear one. And I've asked experienced members of the panel about that, and they all agree that there could be better liaison, because of course the child's social worker, the fostering social worker, knows a lot about the carer and the child. But after that, the fostering panel goes into a lot of detail. We read lots of reports, we talk to these people, and they're very friendly meetings, and we find out things that really need action, and yet it's outside our remit to give that action. So you need better liaison with the fostering panel for other issues that come up. So that's another one. I'm being a bit like Councillor Kenyon. I'm firing shotgun stuff here, but another thing we've come across a couple of times, and I won't say too much detail because it may identify the families involved, but sometimes the decision made to us seems bizarre. Decisions outside our remit, where, for example, a fostering application has been turned down. I think it's because the priorities that are placed on your managers are perhaps out of proportion to reality. For example, yes, suitable accommodation is definitely a useful thing, but it shouldn't trump other things. If you have an excellent foster carer with an excellent loving family, proven and reported on to be excellent, a problem with accommodation is not a reason to block a an increase or a change in the foster parents and the carers' role, because there are things more important than accommodation. I lived in Hong Kong for 45 years, and there are extremely happy families with 5 children living in 600 square feet. Not that that's ideal, but if everything else is great, it should trump the difficulty with accommodation. So that's another issue. And finally, a thing I wanted to say about the fostering panel is that I was very pleased to hear you describe the recruitment program. It sounds good, actually, but nobody on the fostering panel knows about it. I was specifically asked by them to ask at our scrutiny what the recruitment policy is, or the program, the recruitment strategy. Clearly you have one, but it's not been conveyed properly to the fostering panel, who need to know. And really finally, the fostering panel doesn't have a home. We generally rent a room at the Shell store, but that's not always available. And twice we've been in quite inappropriate locations because that was all we could get. I think, given that fostering is a great deal cheaper than children in care and a great deal better for the children, I think we could invest a little bit in having a home for the fostering panel, and that could be dual use, because it can be a place where, outside of fostering panel meetings, where we can meet carers, we can have liaison meetings, we can have training sessions. It would be great if we could find a place, probably not in Plough Lane, we need to be away from the official things, but find somewhere where the fostering panel can have a home and not have to rely on renting a room at the Shell store. So that's it from me so far until I get something more, but I'd like to particularly emphasise the thing about kinship carers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. I'm just wondering who would like to pick up that on kinship carers, and also Jaswinder, I suspect that you might want to respond to the issue of the recruitment strategy and how that's going, and then also perhaps we can just look at how that gets conveyed to the fostering panel, because there seem to be issues also around the fostering panel and how that is actually being properly supported, and it seems that there's a strong connection between that and the support offered to foster families. Gail, did you want to come in before Jaswinder?
Please, if you don't mind, I think it's a really good suggestion of yours for Jaswinder to respond with the details of the recruitment programme, because she knows that very well. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Highfield. The part of the role of the panel advisor is about the liaison that Councillor Highfield has referred to, or certainly some of the examples he's given where that has not happened. So I will ask Jazz to pick up that issue regarding communication and liaison between the panel and the service, be that the fostering service regarding your training, Councillor Highfield, but also how we relay the information about the recruitment programme to the panel as a whole. Any of the specific issues that the panel have come across that don't make sense or they would like to question, the role of the panel advisor would be to do the linking and the liaison, and should be feeding back to Jaswinder in the first instance as the head of service. So I will again ask Jazz to speak with the panel advisor directly so that we can get the specifics of those particular situations or scenarios that you were referring to, Councillor Highfield, so that we can look at those and respond to those example by example, scenario by scenario. Always helpful in those situations to deal with the specifics. I just did want to say something about national minimum standards for approving foster carers. There are some expectations that are written in the national minimum standards, whereby all local authorities would need to ensure that those standards were met. Some of those do include, for example, households, type of household space, bedroom space, etc. But again, if we have the specific examples, we would always be open to wanting to consider and perhaps reconsider, if necessary, any of those particular examples that you were referring to. So hopefully that has addressed some of the points that Councillor Highfield made, but the particular point regarding recruitment programme, I'll hand over to Jazz, if I may.
Can I
just come back first on that? I'm quite confident that the panel advisor, who has now left us sadly, had been conveying our concerns through the proper channels. She was an exceptional lady, and I'm sure that was being done.
If we could just quickly give Councillor Proctor an opportunity to ask his question. Sorry, Jazz, but I think it was relevant to what Gail was saying.
Yeah, sorry, I am very keen to talk about recruitment, but just before, because there's a risk that things move away, and I just wanted to come. So we've been talking about foster carers and their experiences of the service, and I haven't heard very much about what we're actively doing to make sure we understand where foster carers have concerns. And there's a very obvious potential power imbalance, and there's a history of the service where foster carers might not feel confident coming forwards. And so I just like to know what mechanisms we have. Is there, do we recognise a foster carers trade union? Are there ways in which foster carers can raise concerns with the service, which might be slightly a step back? And how can we be confident that we do know where there are concerns, and if we're not hearing anything, that means there aren't any concerns?
So we do have the foster care representatives. So they are a group of foster carers who take questions and queries and concerns from foster carers, and they meet with me and the team managers, the fostering team managers, on a monthly basis. So we meet every third Thursday of the month for a morning, and we go through the concerns that they want to raise. Something that Rabina started, Rabina Khan, and we are trying to build on that. So we are very much trying to get them involved. We recognise that there are things that we've had to do quite quickly that we haven't had the opportunity to involve them in. But going forwards, our intentions are very much to have them involved in planning events, in taking an active part in recruitment campaigns, you know, and to very much be ambassadors and representatives and feedback. So have that two-way communication. We also meet with all the foster carers. So we have an all foster carer meeting every 2 months, again on a Thursday morning, and that's the whole of the morning, where foster carers will meet with us. We can put on agendaed items, but it's also a space for them to come together and collectively share any concerns. So we are still trying to work with foster carers and very much trying to take their feedback, trying to take their concerns and work them through. We understand we've got a long way to go. Trust needs to be rebuilt. We're still on that journey, but our intention is to keep building on that.
Just Winda, Councillor Kenyon had a point to make.
Yeah, it's on the same thing. I'm glad you mentioned the foster carers he talked so rosely about it, but one of them's actually leaving because they don't feel they're being listened to, which is appalling, really. They're one of the representatives. They don't feel that they're being listened to. The same as what I said earlier in the meeting. They go along as reps. They give their time up. They don't get paid any additional extra for this. They go along, give the time up because they want to improve the service. They want to help the people that are doing the same thing that they're doing. So that they do a fantastic job, but they're not being listened to. And I did ask before, and it wasn't answered, but how many people have actually left the foster service in the last 12 months? I know one that's recently left, a different one to the person I was talking to before. I say I didn't have to scratch very hard to get these people contacting me. when they decided to leave, there wasn't even a thank you. No one contacted them. I thanked them. I thanked a couple of them. I said, just thank you, personally. For me, I've been involved with the council for, I don't know, too many years now. But I said thank you. No one else did. From the chief executive all the way down, no one said thank you for your service. Because that's what they've done. It doesn't matter if you get paid. It doesn't matter. It does matter. None of them were asked what could we do differently? What would make you stay? They weren't asked that. That's awful. You know, they may well have said, okay, we'll stay, but this is what we want to do. It might be monetary. It might just be something that's really simple. They weren't contacted. That's appalling. So that needs to improve. And on that, I think I'd like to come along to one of these representative meetings. Invite me along, because I'd like to sit in there and I damn well make sure that the points they're bringing up were followed through, because I don't think it is at the moment.
Can I just add just a bit of information? There is a carers conference on the 15th at the Shell store. So just for information.
Is that specifically for foster carers conference, that is? And okay, we've got Councillor Thomas who would like to speak, and then Councillor Proctor. Can we answer that question? Does anybody have that information? How many foster carers have left in the past year?
And how many have we recruited in the same period?
I have to get back to you on that.
I think that's fundamental of this meeting. This should be here. It should be here. That should be at the top of your page. How many we got in? How many have left?
Okay, if we can request that, please, that information. How many have left? How many have been recruited? Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I think it's rather fortuitous that I've subbed on this committee, because this year I have been involved with a foster family in what several people gave up on this one, but it was sort of, I was asked to intervene, and luckily it was the intervention was successful. But I was, in February, I was shown all the WhatsApp messages for the fostering group, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. And, you know, looking at this service now from an outside, from my sort of experience, which you can see is quite a lot, I think the service has got lost in the mists of time. I don't think you've modernised. I don't think you've got up with what is required to keep these foster parents. My cousin approached me the other day. She's a foster carer, and some of the things that she could tell me, and she's an ex-farmer. She's a retired farmer. She's a very, very matter-of-fact sort of person. But what she was telling me was just awful. And I really do think you need to go back to the drawing board now and look at your service and modernise yourself. This is 2024. You know, I'm thinking this is sort of back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, some of the things that you're doing. And as regards your foster carers, yes, they are damn scared to criticise. That was made very plain in my involvement with the foster care. They are very, very cautious about it, because you seem to just, as Councillor Highfield has said, they feel they're going to just have the children taken away. In this particular case, they've threatened to take this child away, and there was no real reason. Yes, I know that there was a mental problem with the father, but there was no real concrete reason for, and it was the threats that went with it, not the case of saying, right, we have to have a conference, we have to have this, we have to have that, which is what it has to be done. Child has to be protected. But some of the things that were said to this fostering family was
Thomas,
terrible.
sorry, I'm going to just interrupt you. I mean, it is important what you're saying, but I think we just need to be very careful that we don't go too far into the specifics.
I think nothing away.
I think, and Councillor Proctor, I know you want to come in there. I think what's becoming quite clear is that there is still the confidence in the service and the kind of relationship, and because this is all about relationships, it's about children at the heart of those relationships, and it feels like there is a sort of breakdown. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is in terms of kind of reviewing the service, have we had any external support in the review of the service, and have we had any feedback on that and an action plan coming from that? So that is, Gail, yes, can you respond?
Yes, yes, we do. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had some verbal feedback. There was a piece of research which was DFE funded, called Fostering Link Service. So there was an independent external consultant who came and undertook a diagnostic review of fostering, specifically in relation to recruitment and approval. And Jazz and I met with the independent consultant Michelle Whiting last week, and we are imminently expecting her written report. We've already made a decision that that report will form the basis of a refresh of the fostering recruitment and approval pathway and programme. And that piece of research is backed by, and it's in partnership with Quorum and Mott MacDonald. So that is definitely an external DFE funded piece of research, which afforded us a very helpful diagnostic. We were one of 9 local authorities that received the diagnostic. And as I said, we're just in the process of, we've had the verbal feedback, we're now awaiting the written feedback, which, as I say, should be imminent.
Thank you. No, thank you, Gail. I think I'm just wondering whether we need to actually ask for a recommendation, maybe on feedback, that we include feedback from foster carers. If there is a diagnostic there, potentially what we need to do is sort of expand that out to include the feedback from foster carers, so that it can form part of the same piece of work. Councillor Proctor, you had a question.
This is still on the same topic. That fostering links, you seem to say that was about recruitment and approval, but I think we were more interested in, I guess, retention and existing foster carers, and I'm interested in if we know of councils that have got really good practice in how they work with existing foster carers and what we can learn from them.
Yes, so the DFE research that I've just mentioned will provide us with a bespoke feedback report, which we will use to refresh our recruitment and approval programme. But it also, phase 2, allows us to obtain support and intervention to assist us to address the issues that have been raised, and this is by taking some of the best examples. So we do know from Michelle Whiting, who is the independent consultant who undertook our diagnostic, that she's got some examples of best practice from other places. So we would also be using that to refresh and revise our approach as well.
Councillor Hayfield.
Yes, on that topic, have we heard anything from Leeds, who are working with us on the overall improvement programme? Do they do anything different in fostering that we don't do? Have we heard anything about that?
Not specifically, however, we are progressing with our programme. We're sort of in phase 2 of the delivery programme with Leeds, and one of the things that we were proposing to do in receipt of the DFE diagnostic, we were going to share that with Leeds and ask for Leeds support in the refresh and the revision of our approach. And that wouldn't just be about, the point being taken, just about the fostering recruitment and approval. That would be more generically across the whole service.
Yeah, Councillor Kenyon.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been quite tough on you guys today, and I make no apologies for that. But I would like to say is that I think the children within the fostering service are getting some of the finest care that can be given. So I don't think for a second any of them are not safe. I think the administration around them needs to be improved, and the care for the carers, look after foster carers, is essential that it gets improved. One point I'd like to bring up is I don't know a huge amount about this, but there's different levels of caring. There's level 1 up to level 3, and you start off as level 1, and you have to fill books in. I mean, nod if you agree, and then you can go to level 2 and level 3, and then is there additional pay if you're a level 3 carer? I'm not. Yes, there is. Excellent. Well, it's been fed back to me that people jump through the hoops at level 1, and it can take sort of years to do it, and it's progression. It's like a trade, isn't it? You get better, you go up there. Some people are able to sort of get there very quickly if they're on the favourites on the strikers list, and others sit in level 1 or level 2. Now, I'd like to see that looked at, and a fair playing field for everybody, so there is a progression, so you know how you go from level 1 to level 2. You know how you go from level 2 to level 3, so they can all become strikers because they're doing the same job. So potentially, if they're at level 3, they're going to get paid better, and it is about not penny pinching and making sure these foster carers are looked after. So I'd like to see as a recommendation that they come back with a structure for how foster carers progress from not only trainees, are they level 1 up to level 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kenyon. Mr. Pratley, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think we keep making assumptions. So we keep saying, Councillor Kenyon just said, we know that all the children are safe. Do we? We seem to be inferring that in-house is better than using our external agencies. Do we have any evidence that supports that? Can we, if I'm a child and I'm being taken into care, it seems as though I could be in kinship care, I could be in in-house foster care, I could be in foster care by an independent organisation, I could be in residential care, I could be in some other supported accommodation. How would I know as a child which of those is best for me? And I'm worried that your main priority when it comes to that slide was about value for money for the local authority, as opposed to making sure that we've got the right placement for that particular person. I'm worried about the comments I've heard about the panel and the way that panel is done. I'm sure it's done well. Some of the questions that we received from members of the public suggested that if there was information that was coming forward, how could they be absolutely confident that information was making its way through to the panel if the panel haven't been trained? Again, it's just I'm hearing lots of things that make me feel quite nervous, and we're not necessarily getting answers to that. Why are more people prepared to offer their services through an independent fostering agency as opposed to through the local authority? Why have we asked that question? Is it about money? Is it about they don't want to be associated with the local authority? Because we have more providing through independent than we do for the local authority. I'd be keen to know the answer to that.
Thank you. Is anybody able to respond to that?
I will. Councillor Fagan, I'll attempt to respond to that.
Thank you.
So, in terms of safeguarding, we have received 4 Ofsted monitoring visits that have reviewed our quality assurance and our casework in respect of children in care and young people in our care. And through none of those 4 monitoring visits was any child or young person escalated due to safeguarding concerns. And the Ofsted inspectors did indeed review children in care and young people in care as part of their monitoring visit. We also have independent reviewing officers whose role it is to independently review the children's care plans and placement plans. And also, in terms of, I'm really I don't think Councillor Kenyon needs to apologise for being harsh, and I think harsh on officers today. And he said he was not going to make any excuses for being so. And I'm really pleased to hear that there is the commitment and the concern from elected members for fostering. It is improving from a very low base. There are legacy issues where foster carers have not necessarily been treated the best historically. And the service, as part of the Children's Improvement Plan, has definitely raised the profile of foster carers. I do need to address the point of view that was just mentioned regarding decisions being made purely for value for money. That is a consideration, but it's not the only consideration. The profile of the child's needs, risks and circumstances is what drives the search for an appropriate match. Where at all possible, that will be with our in-house foster carers. But there are some children's needs that we're not able to meet. And we do have a fairly mixed response using in-house provision as well as external provision. And the external provision that I mentioned was on the home finding team slide of the presentation. Under the paramountcy principle of the Children Act, it will always be the children's needs and circumstances that are paramount. But value for money is what we also do need to consider for the council.
Thank you. One of the questions that was raised by a councillor privately was the issue of children who are being fostered in the county by independent fostering agencies. Are those children on our radar, and have they? Is there is it this social work provision actually being joined up? And I think that this it comes back to the issue of data. Actually, do we have our hands on the data that we need, or is there more work to do also in terms of data? Gail, did you?
Fagan, yes. To reassure you and members of Scrutiny, all of our children in care placed with an independent fostering agency will have the same standards and expectations in respect of an allocated social worker for them, as well as an identified dedicated independent reviewing officer and regular statutory reviews. There is no difference for those children who are placed with in-house foster carers and those who are placed with independent fostering agencies. So that's not a differential that should adversely impact on the child. We also have safeguarding issues that might be raised in respect of independent fostering agencies, and our response to those would be according to the same accepted child protection procedures involving a local authority designated officer if there were safeguarding concerns about a foster carer. So all of those matters would be responded to in the same way, regardless of whether a child was in an in-house fostering provision or an external independent fostering agency.
Thank you. And what about children that actually come from out of county? So if there are children fostered in Herefordshire but actually come from out of the county?
So if children are fostered with an independent fostering agency in Herefordshire, the statutory responsibility for that child's care remains with their placing local authority. It doesn't transfer to Herefordshire. So if they come from, say, Oxfordshire as a child in care to Oxfordshire, Oxfordshire retain that statutory responsibility. We don't take that over.
And there's no communication between the two services about those children?
Yes, there are formal statutory notifications when Herefordshire would place a child in care in another local authority, or another local authority would place a child in care in Herefordshire. There are statutory notifications in respect of children's services and also health services. So we would be notified and we would know that, but the statutory responsibility for the care planning and placement planning and support would remain with the placing local authority.
Okay, thank you. I think that relies on a good communication between different social work departments, and I'm not sure if that sort of exists. I think I've heard some hearsay that they feel that communication, people feel that communication doesn't exist. So I've got a flurry of hands now, and at
Just
some
a quick
point,
question to follow up on that.
Okay.
Is that a statutory requirement? It's not something you can change.
It is, Councillor Highfield. That's
So in other words,
across the country.
We've probably got social workers from Oxfordshire travelling to Herefordshire, and we've got Herefordshire social workers travelling to Oxfordshire. It doesn't honestly make much sense for continuity of keeping an eye on them.
Okay, we've got a question from Councillor Harvey and then Councillor Proctor.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for being very open with the answers that you've been providing us with. I was a little disappointed with the report that was provided to the committee in the agenda. It did seem quite thin if it was aimed at giving an introduction to a rounded picture of the fostering here in Herefordshire. But I think the appendix that you've provided to us, which I know you haven't had the opportunity yet to talk through, and it might be helpful to the committee and members of the public listening to actually have a bit of a walk through that at some point. I think does fill in some of the gaps. And it was really helpful for you to be walking us through the slide set that you provided. I note in the report that in 2022, as part of preparing the improvement plan, the report says at paragraph 4 that in the autumn there were a number of meetings with key stakeholders, including foster carers, looking at issues and areas for improvement. And at that point, it identified a significant loss of trust and confidence in the service and a need to repair the relationship. So I'd like to start off by asking what the actions are that were taken as a consequence of receiving that feedback, and how people who are foster carers with us now might see things being a little bit different as a consequence of that, seeing as we're kind of 18 months on from receiving that feedback. And then I've got some more questions, but I'll take it a step at a time.
Who's able to respond to that question?
I would like to ask Jazz to respond to that, because she's very close to the support and the groups, etc. But I would just like to add, before she does that, that the position in 2022, around the time that we were formulating the improvement.
You've gone on mute, Gail, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must have pressed that inadvertently. My apologies. I was just saying that in 2022, having undertaken those reference groups to consult with foster carers and other professionals, the feelings were very, very raw, and I just think the opportunity to go and speak with, face to face, speak with, and listen to, and attempt to respond to the individual issues that were raised was a key priority for the former head of service and service manager. And there were no, I mean, Jazz has recently in this meeting outlined the pattern of meetings with foster care. There was nothing of that sort back in 2022. The slides that I went through at the beginning of the meeting, there were no newsletters. The training programme, such that it was very loose, and therefore some of the key elements of a framework of support were missing or fractured or needed an awful lot of work. So those are things that have been put in place. But if you are a foster carer who has had a difficult experience, you need to see and experience that before you feel able to move forward. And I think we're still in that process with a number of our foster carers. So I think there is a lot for us to prove and to engage. Jazz was talking about there are a number of things that we've had to do at pace, and the point to be made there is when you're working at pace, you are not often as collaborative as you need to be. And what the emphasis is in terms of moving forward is about co-producing. So with the foster carer ambassadors, with the meetings, with those champions, and with the larger meetings in terms of the all fostering meetings, those will be key themes moving forward. But we've come from a low base. I don't think for 1 minute that all issues are resolved. I certainly think we've heard from a number of your colleagues, Councillor Harvey, that got more direct feedback or engagement in the fostering panel. They've spoken for themselves about what they've heard or what they've been told or what they've been involved in. And I think that gives us a good indication that we have a considerable way to go. So we're not carrying on doing more of the same because we think those things are working. There's clearly a lot of the things that we're doing that we have already had to revise or refresh, or are in the process of revising and refreshing, and increasingly wanting and needing to do that with and alongside the foster carers themselves. I mean, I hear many reports most days, if not all, every day of the week, hearing about some fantastic work that our foster carers do. They are incredibly committed to our children, and they work very hard, often in some very challenging circumstances, to provide dedicated care for children who are traumatised. And whilst we may not have got everything where it needs to be, there is an absolute recognition, certainly from the fostering service, that the foster carers that we do have and those that we are attempting to recruit are very precious and very valued.
Okay, so the things that we have done to try and improve relationships and... Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, so the things that we have done, we know that Robina undertook to meeting large numbers of foster carers, which she did, and we do continue that work. So we are meeting, as I said, with foster carers every 2 months. There's a long way to go, but we are committed to continuing working with foster carers. The HIP service has been recommissioned, so that is now provided by Meadows Psychology Services. They are providing a service called Safer Connections, and they offer a broader based intensive therapeutic support service to support foster carers and children in their care. We have an agreement for a psychologist to be recruited in the fostering service, which is corporate parenting service, so that children who fall through that gap where CAMS services are not available to them can receive a support service. The ECHO team have been expanded So they can also work with children in foster care and improving those relationships. We have committed to publishing newsletters, so foster carers get a newsletter telling them of all the events that are taking place, and we have their peer support group. We intend on increasing that over time, and the training programme for foster carers has been refreshed and expanded. We've referred to the council tax issue, which is being explored and will be discussed. And we do now have more permanent staff, so we're better able to build those lasting relationships with carers. So we are working, we recognise that we're starting, like Gail said, from a very low base, but we are working to try and improve that.
Councillor Harvey, did you say you had some other questions?
I do, and thank you both for the answers that you've provided. I think one of the things that struck me in reading the paperwork that was provided to the committee in the agenda was that it did seem there were some improvements that were identified there in terms of routes by which we communicate. But I didn't get a sense of two-way communication. Some of the things that you've talked about in the room here, in terms of the peer group and the 2 monthly meetings and so forth, give a feel for there being opportunities to feed back the other way. But very much the voice of the carer and the voice of the child. I had lots of questions around how we actually do that. I mean, traditional kind of complaints management indicates that, you know, a complainant whose complaint is satisfactorily handled comes away more satisfied than somebody who didn't complain in the first place. So, you know, getting that communication, even if it's communicating very small steps, and having that two-way those two-way channels there, I think is a really important thing that, you know, we need to be showing that we're doing, so that we give people lots of different ways in, you know, in which to identify themselves, or, you know, to, you know, comment anonymously if they don't feel safe identifying themselves about the kind of issues that they've got. Things like rapid access to CAMS support and psychologists, and the kind of wraparound advice that people might need urgently and at weekends and out of hours, because, you know, things don't go wrong between 9 and 5 when we're in the office. I think is again something I'd be keen to, you know, to see more of. It sounds like we've got something there at the moment, but, you know, giving our foster families confidence that if they do have a wobble, they can quickly get to somebody who can provide them with some rapid support before things spiral or get out of hand, is, I'm sure, be, you know, very confidence building. Ofsted originally identified 9 broad areas for improvement when they gave us our devastating assessment, 2 of which mention fostering specifically. One's about sufficiency and stability of foster carer numbers, and the other was about the timely and robust identification of children at risk from harm living in private fostering arrangements. Now, the improvement plan that I was able to access online, which is the one that was updated in November last year, and I understand from what you said that there's one that's coming to Cabinet very, very shortly, but that's the only one that's been available to members of this committee in the absence of anything being provided with the documentation in the agenda pack. That improvement plan from November 2023 states that we completed a review of the fostering service capacity and capability in June last year, and a review of the sufficiency strategy in July last year. So what were the outcomes of those two reviews?
So the Jazz will be able to respond to the sufficiency strategy, but the outcome of the workforce review was about the instability within the fostering service workforce. And at that stage, I mean, I mentioned that we're 65% permanent now. We certainly weren't 65% permanent then. So that has been the strategy, like it is with other parts of the service, is about building our permanent workforce in order to grow the stability and use that as a platform to recruit additional permanent staff. So we've achieved that to some significant degree, but as I've said, it's only 65%. There's still a way to go on that. But with the permanence within the management group, it is anticipated that will help us push forward in terms of recruiting permanent practitioners. So that's the strategy there, and we have been making good strides on that, but as I say, a way to go. In terms of sufficiency, the sufficiency of children's placements was about growing the numbers and the choice, so that we had better opportunities to meet all of the needs of all of our children in care who require a placement. That necessarily includes the recruitment and approval of in-house foster carers, but it also included significant market development, which was the slide around the home finding team, particularly with our providers, local providers, and using the local provider network more efficiently and effectively, and making sure that the historical difficulties around provider payments was addressed, because that was a long-standing issue, and many providers, understandably, who provided care wanted to be paid for the care that they provided, and that had not historically been the case in all situations, and that had adversely impacted on the local authorities' relationships with providers. So that has now been addressed, and some of the internal processes to support the payment of providers has been addressed. So we've got different systems and processes in place now, which should be strengthened as we move forward. But anything around unresolved historical issues regarding payments have largely been addressed, which is a very positive thing in terms of external providers. We don't have, in terms of our sufficiency strategy, we have not had our own in-house residential provision, and the sufficiency strategy has explored that, so that we are now, we've been going through a tendering process, and that process has progressed to the point that in January, February of next year, we should have some in-house residential provision, which is not something that we've had for a considerable time.
Thank you, Gail. Jazz, did you want to come back on the sufficiency strategy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Gail has said. So we have been looking at sufficiency and how we can improve the numbers of foster carers. In terms of our marketing strategy, we have done targeted marketing campaigns. So we have virtual information evenings. We're doing more events locally, and we're increasing our visibility. We have, as of the 22nd of April, we are the top on Google searches. So we've gone live with Google searches. So when people do search fostering and search anything to do with fostering, we come up in the top lines of inquiry. We have a good schedule of events, as was referred to, for Fostering Fortnight, and that's going to include our first Foster Carers Conference, which will be on the 15th of May. So we do have a dedicated marketing officer now, and we are reviewing how we recruit, how we generate inquiries. We are looking to review our current foster care availability, to look at how we improve what we already have as well, how we support those carers going forward. We do recognise that we have a number of respite carers where the need is actually for short-term or long-term foster carers. So we are having a meeting this week with respite carers to see how we can support them to consider offering more. So there is there is an active recruitment campaign to address sufficiency.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey,
Okay,
more questions?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. Sorry, that third bite. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, Gail, you said in answer to an earlier question that your supervising social workers had a casework. So, there were yardsticks to do with how many cases it was reasonable to expect each supervising social worker to be able to oversee. If I've understood the figures that you've provided to us, and I think it's the ones in Appendix 2, we've got roughly 2/3 of the children that we have in care in some sort of fostering or extended family arrangement, which just indicates how important the service is to the overall looked after provision that this council has, which makes my heart bleed a bit when I hear, how we kind of through COVID and beforehand had allowed the service in terms of the support that it provided to families to become eroded. Now I know, Sam, you were raising a concern that the perception seems to be that we're really concerned about money. Well, when money is as tight as it is, it will be something that is focused on. But I think making sure the message is always that we're looking through the lens of the best outcome for the child, always in what we do, but we make sure we understand what the cost implications are of taking one route or another, so that we can manage our budgets effectively. I think is an important one, because the perception can become that what we focus on, because we're really not doing it very well, is what's important. And clearly that isn't the case when it comes to children's social care. But if our plan is to recruit more families and to be better at supporting them, isn't it the case that we would need to recruit an in-house support team and have our own internal fostering service, sufficient ahead of the bow wave of additional foster carers? Otherwise, if we do it purely on a caseload basis, we're always recruiting in arrears, and the risk is that people will end up with higher caseloads because we're recruiting in arrears. And that, by its very nature, impacts on the quality of support that we can provide.
Gail or Jazz, do you want to come back on that? Maybe Jazz, it kind of fits in with what your the support that you've been sort of talking about.
So we do have an in-house support team with supervising social workers. We've talked about Safe Connections. They provide that wraparound therapeutic support that foster carers might need. And we are seeking to appoint an in-house psychologist that will work with those children who, like I said, fall through the gaps. It does take some time to recruit a foster carer, so we respond to this by getting more social workers, you know, if needed. We are trying to consider children moving back to Hereford, you know, those children that are in residential care. We do review those children to see if there is any way that they can be supported to move back to in-house foster carers, and how foster carers can be supported to care for those children. It is something that we are looking to review as part of the diagnostic that we've had as well, how we can support foster carers, because we did have a scheme in the past. It hasn't been used as effectively as it could. It would tie into those levels of foster carer as well, and it would mean some intensive support for the foster carer and for the child to return to foster care. So that is something that we're reviewing and looking into as part of sufficiency as well.
Okay, thank you. Gail, did you want to come in there?
Well, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Harvey's comments. So I think we've established that the driver for placing children is about what's in their best interests according to the profile of their needs, risks and circumstances. We do have a keen eye on value for money, and as Councillor Harvey's pointed out, we have some real need to do that in Herefordshire. So we attempt to do that very carefully and cautiously. But in terms of the funding that we spend on external placements are by definition more expensive than in-house foster care. The more money you spend on a placement doesn't always mean you get better quality. That doesn't always follow. But if we can bring more children back into Herefordshire and into in-house provision, it means we have the opportunity to consider whether we can recycle some of our funding so that we can grow our workforce and our foster carers in the way that we've been describing through the various strategies that we have, so that we're spending more of our available budget to grow our in-house fostering service, for example, and develop our provision to be able to compete with some of the best and outstanding fostering services in the country. That would be the endeavour, and we would want to try and get ahead of that curve in order to be able to respond positively in the way that Councillor Harvey was just describing, so that we're ahead of the game rather than behind the curve. But it does require us to progress the strategy to ensure that we are only ever bringing in children into our care where it is absolutely right and proper and in their best interest to do so. And also, and this was attended to in Appendix 2, which Councillor Harvey mentioned, is that we've had a much more of a focus on permanence planning, so that where we are able to achieve permanence, and some of that is through reunification of children that are subject to care orders and have been in care, where we can safely return those children to their parents. Then that is another way that we can achieve that permanence and also adjust the spend that we have. There will be some spend associated with that, but it will hopefully be less than the spend that we would previously have been paying in terms of some of the much more expensive external placement provisions.
Yes, Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Harvey,
So,
did you want to come in
thank you.
last time?
Final one from me. Thank you very much. That's good to hear. I think, you know, I'm very conscious that members of the public, like Ms. Reid, has been really exercised for a long period of time on the differential in terms of the cost between different sorts of care provision. And, you know, it's good to hear that, you know, we are understanding better than we have done our costs, but the focus remains on getting the right sustainable and, you know, long-term stable provision for our young people, and that can't always be something that can be rushed. I was very pleased to see on the website talking about fostering on our website a specific page talking about how we encourage foster carers from the LGBTQ plus community to consider you know, joining us and becoming foster carers. I'm conscious in the report that the committee was provided with, that in the equality section, it does talk about welcoming applications from, you know, all members of the community. And I was just wondering how we're actually extending that invitation that's been made to the LGBTQ plus community to differently abled, neurodivergent, people with protected characteristics, and from you know, minority groups also becoming foster carers.
So I think in respect of all of those issues, Councillor Harvey, that refers, I think, back to the point that Jazz was making regarding our marketing officer, because where we market and how we initiate conversations to reap inquiries is really important. So that is part of the ongoing campaign. I would say in many ways, we ourselves have become a fostering friendly employer, and it would be good if we could also encourage some of the larger employers from health, for example, or police, for example, to also consider becoming fostering friendly as well. That's also part of our strategy, and in many other local authorities, trying to reach out to some of the public sectors, but not only public sector, also private companies locally, to get as much diversity from the local community. So if you're living and working in Herefordshire, or, you know, you may live and work, but you may work in Herefordshire and you may just be, you know, on the border or just over the border. That the way that we reach out and begin that conversation and say, we're here, how can we help you foster? What is it that we can do to help you foster? I think that's a conversation that we need to be having more and more with our existing foster carers, as well as those that we may wish to attract in the future.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And in the same way as we are challenging our partners and through networks that the council has to provide opportunities for looked after children to experience life in different ways and to have job experience and that sort of thing. I think maybe I'd like to challenge you guys to hear more about how you're piggybacking off the kind of services and initiatives that the council and public health are providing into the disabled community, dealing with supporting people with neurodivergent characteristics, differently abled families, to be saying, in addition to providing you with support and services that you need, have you thought about fostering, or has somebody in your family network thought
Mentioned it.
about?
Yeah.
And because I think, we've got really big networks as a council. We do a lot of stuff into the business community as well. And I think just, in the same way as we ask people to, think about going the extra mile for somebody who's been employed in the armed services, doing something extra, thinking about looked after children and thinking about fostering. I think the more we can stack those kind of messages out into our own networks, and I'd really kind of like to hear a bit more about how we might do that and do that better than we are at the moment. And that's me done now. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Councillor Kenyon, you want to speak, and then Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the relationship between the council, social services, and the foster carers needs to have a big shake-up and a fundamental change, a shift. Foster carers need to be respected. They need to be believed. They need to be supported. I hope you're writing this down. And they need to be listened to. And what you hear, you need to act upon. All decisions must be justified and fair, because there's decisions that are made that aren't fair. Social work, support, foster carers, it's not fair across the board. Life isn't fair. I know that. However, we should do our utmost to make sure all those foster carers are being supported and things happen in a fair way. Coming back to level 1 to level 3, coming back to why is this foster carer getting more children and then another foster carer isn't? Why is it taking so long if there's a complaint made against a foster carer to be sorted out? And all that time, children are taken away from that foster carer, they're losing their income. They lose their income and they're losing the thing they truly, and not just that, it's eroding confidence in the council. So it needs to be a big shift. I'd like to make a recommendation, Chairman, in that that a councillor is appointed to go along and represent foster carers. That's someone that they can come to, talk to, outside of the council, but obviously inside, because they can speak on their behalf, but someone they can trust. Someone they know that will push or fight for them to make sure things, so the conversations they can have with someone that you can't have in a meeting. That's why there's no foster carers here today. So my recommendation is that we almost have, I'd like a children's champion, we have a fostering champion that looks out for foster carers, and that way you won't keep losing foster carers to where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Kenyon. And I'd quite like to, Councillor Proctor, you can come in next. And then I'd quite like to just pull this back together, including that recommendation, which I suspect is a foster carer champion that we're recommending. But Councillor Proctor, you go first. And then if everyone's satisfied, we can just actually start rounding it. Oh, Councillor Highfield. Okay. Councillor Proctor, Councillor Highfield. Anybody else? Councillor Thomas. Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to explore the marketing strategy a bit more, and this does relate to some of the things that we've been talking about. So, as seems to be the practice in this committee, I will speak for a short while before asking any questions. So we've got 168 households for fostering at the moment. So I'd just like to understand what is the target for the next few years based on the marketing strategy? What are we expecting that to grow to? And you've got a marketing officer. I've spent quite a lot of my life in large organisations in comms roles, and it's always very nice to have your own resource down in a service. But the disadvantage of that is you lose a link to kind of the corporate resources, and some of the things that were coming up in that discussion about how we can influence partners to become more foster friendly employees, how we can make better use of the council's networks. Those are things that the corporate communications team is probably better placed to work on. And so, as well as making sure that there's a decent link between that individual marketing officer, I think we, and this is, the chair's not listening to me, but a potential recommendation is that fostering is actually something that the executive put into the corporate communication strategy, and I'd be interested to know whether Councillor Powell and Councillor Stoddart have discussed that how the corporate resources can be used to assist some of the things we talked about here. That's.
Could we possibly go through all the questions and then sort of see how the response, because there may be some that tie in. Yeah, is that all right? Okay, Councillor Hayfield.
Yeah, first a quick one. I think it's great that you meet bi-monthly with the fosterers, but there's a problem with that in that, I mean, I was a great admirer of Robina, who recruited me to the fostering panel, and I'm sure, do you mind if I call you Jazz? Is that okay? And no reflection on you, but to have somebody outside of the system of hierarchy when it comes to fostering to listen to their complaints, perhaps Councillor Kenyon's suggestion is a solution, there may be others, but rather than somebody within the hierarchy listening to them, maybe somebody that's more independent might be useful, so that we genuinely get a reflection. They don't feel limited in what they say. So that's the first suggestion. Perhaps Councillor Kenyon's answer is one of the possibilities there. The second thing is that on the day after tomorrow, you've got the refresh of the Children's Improvement Plan is going to be considered by the Improvement Board. I'm sure Councillor Powell is up to his neck with that. I wanted to know how big a part of the improvement plan does fostering consist, because it is a very important part of our children's services. Does it form a substantial part of the improvement plan, which I haven't seen? And that's it for my questions. Just wanted to comment that I see there's a partnership executive group, which is chaired by the chief executive, and I see that it's aiming to develop a multi-agency report of key performance indicators to drive the delivery of the Children's Improvement Plan. I hate that sort of management speak. I wonder what they actually want to do. But that's it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Kenyon's suggestion, because obviously as a county councillor, I've now been involved twice, one in my own ward and one not. But I think it's quite essential that the councillor for that ward is involved when we do have a problem, when there is a complaint, because they'll come to us, or in my experience, they come to me first and then to you second. So I think that's a very, very good idea, and I think that would be, I would fully support that as a recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, Gail.
So I was just taking some notes. I'll try to respond. So the target for new foster care households is 6 per quarter, 24 per year. The comments around the connectivity between the marketing officer and the corporate comms team, I think probably assumes that we don't have that, but in fact we do. It's an integrated part of the strategy. So our marketing officer does meet with the representative for children's from the corporate comms team. It's particularly because of the reasons that were given. And the reference to the draft refresh of the Children's Improvement Plan that is being considered at the Improvement Board this week, Thursday, has 3 specific priority improvement priorities within it. And they're all outlined in Appendix 2 that was circulated before this meeting.
Thank you. Sam.
Just as a really quick point about partnerships, the Diocese of Hereford has recruited 334 host families in 18 months to provide 800 adults from the Ukraine a place to live and 370 children from the Ukraine a place to live. So that's 334 recruited in 18 months. I mention that for 2 reasons. One, there's a conversation to be had about how we did that, because that's a significantly quicker rate of recruitment than this. I appreciate it's a different setup. But quite a few of those families will now have experienced having somebody within their household, which is coming to an end. That would be 334 people to suggest maybe you'd like to consider fostering at some point in the future. It's a conversation that's probably worth having.
Thank you.
And I have to come back. Paragraph 6 of that Appendix 2 that you referred to there, Gail, says specifically the Children's Improvement Plan does not mention adoption specifically.
No, it refers to permanence, of which adoption is one way to achieve permanence for children. And the pre-scrutiny committee query that I was referring to in Appendix 2 is about references to fostering specifically.
Yes, just to come back, it seems to me, and maybe Councillor Ivan Powell will be able to answer this one, but it seems to me that such an important part of the Children's Improvement Plan, which is adoption, should be specifically mentioned. It should be a substantial lump of that overall plan, because it's important. Because fostering is for many of the children that need care a far better solution than being in care. It's better for them in many ways, and of course it is better for the council because it's cheaper than putting somebody in full-time care. So I feel that should be, in whatever way it is, it should be a substantial chunk of the improvement plan.
So potentially we could put that as a recommendation as well to go in. So if we can sort of do a roundup, and I realise that the officers have it's been quite a difficult meeting, and Jasmine, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to just finish off with that might kind of give us a sort of some degree of hope, because obviously a lot of what the experiences are coming from a service that has been in sort of at a very low base. Possibly a sort of moment of hope before we just pull it all together.
Yes, I just wanted to finish off by saying that I do recognise that, you know, we've got a long way to go in building that trust with foster carers, but we are, like I said, committed to having foster carers working alongside us. My ethos is very much collaborative working. I would like to see foster carers involved in planning some of the events that we do, in having a real voice in how we provide our support. So really, you know, for me, I would like to leave by saying that it is very much a passion of mine. I've been a foster carer myself, so I do understand some of the challenges of fostering, and I'm quite committed to having a better, open, transparent working relationship with foster carers and taking on some of their challenges. Yes, it's been a difficult, you know, meeting today, but I hold hope that we can move forward and we can meet some of those challenges and address some of the deep-seated issues that we have. It's not going to happen overnight, but we will do our best to work with foster carers to come through some of this challenge. And I think the recommendation of a fostering champion is something that we could consider. It's, you know, it is a welcome suggestion that Gail and I can talk about outside of today. So yes, I am. That's what I wanted to say, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your candour and you know the challenge that you've brought. We will certainly take it on.
So thank you very much. Councillor Kenyon, yes.
Well, perhaps not a recommendation, but what I'd like to see is that you say it's been difficult, but this is scrutiny and that's what we do. But I'd like some of this scrutinising that's been gone on today to be fed back down to the troops on the ground, the social workers, perhaps, you know, if they can, for God's sake, they don't make them watch or listen to hold this meeting again. But some of the things that we've spoken about, I'd like to see some sort of briefing paper put together to go out to all the social worker teams and say, look, this is what people have been saying. This is what you need to take on board, because, you know, the words I said about respect, believe, supported and listened to, you know, they need to hear that. You don't need to hear that. Gail, you don't need to hear that, but they do, because they're the people that will be implementing it. So some sort of briefing back down the way to see what that scrutiny committee went on about on that particular day would be important.
Thank you, Councillor Kenyon. Okay, if you could take that back as an action, please. So if I can just wrap up sort of what we've heard, and then you know, look at the recommendations. So obviously, you know, there've been some difficult conversations because the feedback from foster carers has there is some negative feedback. We've heard that actually that this is part of the improvement journey, and that there is actually substantial action already in place to help that along. And I think that the message that's come will certainly help feed into that. Also about the diagnostic, it would be really good to have that diagnostic and the outcome from that come back to scrutiny at some point. Hopefully with some better feedback also from the interaction with foster carers that will develop from the additional meetings that are being had. So we've also got a couple of recommendations. So one of those is to, let me see if I've got this right, Councillor Kenyon, yes.
I've cancelled about 4 recommendations, which I've jotted, all of which are partially formed and require work. So I suggest if we're going to do that, we take a 5-minute break and we just work through those privately.
I've got to leave in a moment, so as long as my recommendation is put forward, but I've got to leave at 4:30, as I said earlier.
Okay, that's... Do you trust us to take your recommendation forward? Could you run through Councillor Kenyon's recommendation?
As I said, Chair, they're half formed at the moment, so I think we just need a break to...
Chairman, I trust this committee. What is life without a little bit of trust from your colleagues?
Right, if we can have an adjournment, please.
Just one moment, and we're live again.
Okay, thank you. If you can read out the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations are as follows. That Herefordshire Council, 1. Appoint and promote an elected member champion for foster carers. 2. Work with the Diocese of Hereford to promote fostering to families who had accommodated Ukrainian families. 3. Work with the Diocese of Hereford to learn lessons from the successful accommodation of Ukrainian families. 4. Provide an account of this committee meeting to social workers in the fostering service. 5. Provide a permanent home for the fostering panel and related activities. And 6. Amends its internet pages to ensure that the Council encourages recruitment of foster parents from a diverse range of foster carer households.
Thank you. Can we please vote en bloc for those recommendations? Does everybody agree with those recommendations? Yep. Great. So that's agreed. Thank you. So just to say that the committee notes the report and approves the recommendations. We've agreed those. We've that brings that item to a close. I would just really like to thank you, Gail and Jaswinder, for attending and for answering and fielding the difficult questions. Hopefully next time we bring the fostering onto the agenda, we will see some of those improvements that you spoken about. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the work programme, and we've heard earlier that we are going to meet to discuss the work programme. So effectively, at the moment, we don't have a work programme. All we have is the date of the next meeting, which is June the 13th at 2 p.m, where we will be discussing workforce issues, and there is a further meeting in July when we'll be meeting with the new director of service and be looking at potentially the complaint system and the work with relation to families. So I think that is it. I would like to thank you all for attending. Can I ask that unless you've any formal business, can please attendees other than council members and officers exit the Plough Lane site? And finally, before I formally close the meeting, can I check with Democratic Services that the live stream has been switched off and we're no longer broadcasting?